Good afternoon. Welcome to the December 22nd, 2020 meeting of the Town Council Charter Review Committee. In accordance with Massachusetts General Law, this meeting is being videotaped and audio recorded, as well as being remotely broadcasted via a Zoom webinar. If there is anyone in our viewing audience who is taping this meeting, would you please announce yourself? Seeing and hearing none, who would like the pleasure of taking minutes tonight?
I'll volunteer.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it. First order of business, we have minutes of the meeting of December 8th. And did everyone, that just came out within the last few hours. Did everyone have a chance to look at them?
Yeah.
Do I hear a motion?
Motion to accept.
Made by Bill and seconded by Jeff. Any discussion?
Larry,
Yes, Ralph?
I noticed when I was just reviewing it that I forgot to add Michael Kane, ex officio non-voting under members present. So I will add him in and just resend it to you.
What do you mean under number 7?
No, under members present,
Okay,
Michael Kane was there and I missed him.
okay. Phil, you accept that as an amendment?
Yes.
And Jeff is your second. You accept that?
Yes.
Good. Okay, any other discussion? All those in favor, Bill Fonseca,
Yes.
Larry Levine, yes. Andy Frazier,
Yes.
Phil Adams,
Yes.
Jeff Bosworth,
Yes.
Tom Christensen,
Yes.
Ralph Page.
Yes.
Good. Okay. We also have minutes from the meeting of December 15th, 2020. And everyone saw the revised version that came in within the last 24 hours. And so do I hear a motion to accept?
So moved.
By Ralph, is there a second?
Second.
By Jeff, is there discussion? Seeing, hearing none, all those in favor, Bill Fonseca,
Abstain.
Larry Levine, yes. Andy Frazier,
Yes.
Phil Adams,
Yes.
Jeff Bosworth,
Yes.
Tom Christensen,
Yes.
and Ralph Page.
Yes.
They're approved. Our first, I'm sorry. Our first order of business, we're delighted to have with us the Honorable Mary McNally, Town Manager of our town. And we are to discuss some issues that have come up during our, is it 5-6 months of discussion that hopefully Mary can help us understand and go forward. And as I'm going through the list, if I miss anything, please stop and yell at me. So our first inquiry of Mary is of the charter, Article 2, Section 7. Action requiring a bylaw. And Mary, have you had a chance to look at these?
Yes, Larry, thanks for sending me the list last week.
Okay.
So I did look into them.
Okay.
And, the comment says review again with town manager duties. So is that suggesting about the interplay between the different articles that call for presentation of a bylaw depending on certain actions that the town manager takes?
Yeah, does the committee recall, I had asked town manager about this section, what we were interested in or confused by?
So Larry, if I may,
Yes, Ralph.
I think I brought some of this up in regards to the establishment of all fees within the town. In particular, let's say the DPW has certain fees, dump fees and stuff like that. The library may have late book fees. The way I read this is any fee that the town charges
Mhm.
is supposed to go through a bylaw. We're supposed to have a whole list of all the fees. And then I know in the past, the general bylaw had a bunch of fees. And once a year, once every 2 years at town meeting, we'd go through and adjust them. That's my take on what this says. And I think the question comes in is that appropriate? Is that the take of the town in general is what this means?
And prior to town council, the town meeting would vote annually on proposed any change in the fees.
Right.
So
I recall that, yeah.
there was a specific list within the general bylaws, the dog licenses and stuff like that.
Mhm.
From what I understand and from E-code, it looks like this elaborates on it and basically says any fee within the town is going to be listed in a chart under the bylaws, and that the council is basically in charge of those. I just, like I said, I think it's one of those, I mean, that's really broadening it. As the DPW will tell you, they have a whole list of fees. Anything from opening the road to cutting a curb to doing all of this. And I guess my thought is it even practical to do everything like that? Is there a way to change the language? Should we change the language, or should we be following this?
Any thoughts on that, Mary?
Well, the first thought that comes to mind is the labor and publication expense for any bylaw that needs a public hearing, right? Do we have to advertise and hold 2 public hearings? And if it's a matter of just increasing a fee slightly, I don't know, as I'm looking at that section, it says provide for a fine or other penalty. So could you make the argument that instituting a fee is different than amending it upward or downward so as to require a bylaw? That's how I would argue it, I suppose. That maybe, I mean, it just seems that that's a lot of expense to go to raise a fee from $50 to $60, if that's what we're talking about.
Any other questions or comments from anyone? Yes, Ralph?
So through E-code process, we're going to be doing a table which lists all the fees.
Mhm.
And so it would literally be, I would think once a year, we would go out to whether it be the departments through you or whatever and say, okay, here's the fee schedule. Is there anything that's not appropriate?
Mhm.
And then adjust the fee schedule one time for the year. So that way there we're not adjusting the fees individually throughout.
Mhm.
To your point exactly, I mean, we don't want to have to do a bylaw for, hey, the dog license went up $5. That's a bylaw. Hey, we cut into the road, we got to do another one. And I think once we do E-code, I think that'll be better, but I just wanted to know if it's even practical to do that.
Okay. Have
Oh,
we,
are you asking me that, Ralph? I mean, because I can certainly solicit the opinions of the departments which charge fees and attempt to implement that practice if that's your pleasure.
I think this is a generalization, and I just, like I said, I'm looking to know, especially with doing E-code, and Jeannie, you know how much we've gone through with this, and
Yeah.
and we were talking about doing a table and adding that, basically all the information in afterwards.
Oh, go ahead, Jeannie.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the logistics of that, Ralph, and I'm wondering if we did that once a year, if it's not unlike what we do with the license renewals once a year.
Yeah.
You know, and maybe we do it in November instead of December or something. And I suppose I'd be in charge of that, reaching out to department heads, see if anything has changed, let me know. And even if it hasn't changed, you still do an approval even if they haven't changed. I mean, we could implement that, but would that be simply a change in the charter in this section to implement that?
I think it would be strictly a change in the bylaw.
Yeah,
Because
I agree with that.
Just all
Yeah,
the fees. The charter's just saying you need to do it. The bylaw itself is where all the fees are.
But Ralph, you're not suggesting that the final approval be taken away from town council?
No, what I'm actually suggesting is that all the departments would then be notified that, hey, any fee structure is listed in here in this table, so that if a new fee is created for something, whether it be cutting into a road or doing this or doing that,
Mhm.
that would have to be added. Any new fees would be added into the bylaw.
Okay.
And that brings the power basically of any fees or any costs, associated penalties or whatever, brings the town council into it. And I think that was what we originally discussed when we did the charter.
Mhm.
And again, I think it's a little bit different than what we did in the past as the Board of Selectmen. I mean, I want to say that bylaw only had, 15 or 20 items on it.
Mhm. Okay. Any other thoughts? Okay, the next item is Article 2, Section 9, and it pertains to access to information. And this,
Plumber's there.
Plumber's
there.
what's that? I can't hear you, Phil.
Plumber is there.
He is.
Yeah, I can hear the dog.
He's been here 15 minutes. He keeps going in and out. And hopefully he gets it fixed. Anyway, this was when town council requests or requires town officials, member of an agency, a town employee to appear before it to give information that they may require in relation to municipal services, functions, powers, or duties within the scope of such person and within the jurisdiction of the town council. I think that's the paragraph we had highlighted to ask Mary about, and specifically about getting the financial information. Any thoughts on that paragraph and the ability of the town council to get financial information? What's your perspective?
I think that there is has been a total change in the dynamic of what council had to experience last year or maybe 2 years ago. I understand from watching other meetings, previous meetings, as well as from what I've been told, that a freedom of information request had to be filed at some point to gather information about the budget. That's never going to happen again, as long as I'm your town manager. We have a new finance director as of July. He and I are working diligently to gather as much financial information as possible. Where the department is understaffed. It's had a vacancy since July 1st, so they have only 2 people working in there, which is very difficult for them. However, despite that, we're working on gathering all the prior year's information to get ready for this year's budget season. Anytime a counselor, well, let me back up a minute. Anytime a council needs financial information, if it's to be discussed in a council meeting, the town council president and I and the town clerk meet a day or two before the agenda is set to determine the content of the items that need to go on the agenda and be prepared for them. So I don't think there's been a problem obtaining financial information at a minimum since last December. And anybody can correct me if you think you have other information that contradicts that. Compounding the problem just a bit is that our previous director left sort of suddenly due to COVID and a variety of other circumstances. And a lot of the record keeping that, as we all do, we have our own mental filing system. It's on hard drives, it's on shared drives, but sometimes tracking down where someone else kept a particular file is not the easiest thing to decipher. And so I know our current director has had a bit of difficulty finding certain accounts and tracking down certain access to certain information, but there's certainly no attempt not to disclose it. It's really just an attempt to find it and share it. So we're Steve and I are jointly committed to providing all the information and then some to any counselor. My issue with this particular article, and in a prior meeting of yours, there was a suggestion made that on the first sentence of Article 9, you would add a comma after town department and say as delineated and limited by the following paragraphs. My concern is that it's not an attempt to keep the information secret. My concern is that my staff in every department are so overworked presently because of COVID and our furloughs, and many departments are still experiencing shortages with vacancies and furloughed employees, that certain counselors might, on occasion, abuse the privilege of direct access. So I'm not looking to exclude anybody's right to information, but if a counselor chooses to call the health director, let's say, and I've got her working on something that is time sensitive and extremely important, well, that director and any other department for that matter is probably going to drop what they're doing because it's a counselor asking the question. And we can't tolerate those interruptions. I don't think they're appropriate. I think that there's nothing that I've experienced yet in my time here that's been so urgent of a request by a counselor that it couldn't wait a day. So if it's processed through me, and believe me, I don't want to micromanage everyone's communication. It's really a scheduling issue and a staffing problem and an occasional abuse of privilege. Those are my thoughts on that particular one about direct access to town employees.
So are you suggesting changing the wording we have?
No, I think it's more conduct than verbiage.
Okay.
Mhm.
Comments from people, questions? Okay. Next one is Article 3, which is the town manager's article, Section 2, subsection 1. And this has been a large discussion issue back and forth by this committee and also by input from town officials, town citizens, etc. And our question is, under the current wording, the town manager makes the appointments now for, in this particular section, of the police chief, fire chief, DPW superintendent, town clerk. There's another section later on, I believe, of
Right.
assessors and some other.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
once your appointment is made, then under the current charter, the town council has 45 days or at their next regularly scheduled meeting, whichever is earlier, to veto that appointment. There's been some talk and discussion about changing that to where the town manager makes a recommendation to the town council and the actual appointment is made by the town council. Your thoughts on this particular issue?
Mary,
You're muted, Mary.
Thank you. I wholeheartedly agree that it's been a major problem and topic of discussion and headache really throughout my short tenure. My personal opinion is that the town manager should continue to make the appointments. And I say that for a couple of reasons, namely and primarily because the department heads are accountable to me as a direct line supervisor. They're the ones that meet with me regularly to discuss the department's operations, progress, failures, mission, goals, advancement, you name it. I think in some sense it would be a bit undermining the authority of someone's direct supervisor to have a third-party body be the appointing authority. However, having said that, that's just my opinion. It would, but I hold a very strong opinion on that subject. The 45 days is really what has caused great consternation, and the fact that the charter is silent with respect to how the town manager's office interacts with the town council on these appointments that have this delay built in. There's no language there that suggests any process for the town manager to use. So, for example, I'll be quite candid. I just appointed a new police chief. Having read the charter and knowing, frankly, that I felt as though it was perhaps the most important appointment or decision I'd been called on to make since I got here. I thought long and hard about the process that I wanted to use. And from the day that the chief told me he was retiring, on that very day, it happened to coincide with a council meeting. So I read his resignation letter into the record that night. That was October 13th. And I informed the council that there was essentially a 90-day period that I had to tweak a job description, vet candidates, advertise, all the things that go into a process for seeking candidates for such a high-profile position. And so I did all that and established a small advisory committee of 2 people in town that I've known and trusted for a long time, conducted the interviews, went through the whole process, came up with a recommendation, or an appointment, actually. And now we're in this sort of limbo period where I think the council will support the appointment, but it makes it very awkward to try to discuss contracts, and timing enters into it. I mean, in this particular instance, there's some urgency to the appointment, in my opinion at least, because I would prefer not to have an interim to avoid that disruption if possible. So I don't know if I'm really answering your question. I think it should stay the way it is, and I'd like to see the 45 days or the next meeting, I'd like to see that period of time shortened. There was a suggestion made at the last council meeting when I did offer this gentleman's candidacy that I could have given these names to the council in an executive session, and I disagree with that. I think that would be an open meeting violation. In fact, I had checked with council prior to that about that very subject. You can't just have executive sessions unless you have a search committee, and the charter doesn't direct a search committee, doesn't direct any sort of a preliminary assessment, kind of leaves your town manager on an island. So I have confidence that I know what I'm doing, and I think the theory behind the charter would be that if you select a town manager in whom you can have some confidence and trust, that you can rely on these decisions and on the process. So I think it's more the delay that occurs, which just creates a great deal of awkwardness and uncertainty that I would hope you could find a way around. And if the way around it is giving the authority to the council, then that's fine, if that's your pleasure. I think it may impact your town manager going forward. And in my own case, I'm pretty sure it would. And in anyone who would succeed me might just take a different view of the position. So, sorry for the ramble, but that's kind of how I was thinking about it.
No ramble. Discussion, questions? Yes, Andy. You're muted. Speak. Go ahead, Andy.
You're right, I am muted. I think I would agree completely with one point that Mary just made. If this section was more specific as to process, I think that it would work in the town manager's favor. It would work in the council's favor because everybody would be on the same page. Everybody would have a better understanding of what was going to take place. So, yeah, that's my comment.
I saw Bill.
I agree with what Mary's saying, and I agree also with Andy. You kind of stole my thunder because I agree with we've got to figure out the process and maybe shorten that time a little bit. But I don't want to see any power taken away from the town manager because that would undermine the intent of the original charter.
Thank you. Phil?
Yeah, Larry, we also discussed to add to these 4 positions, the town attorney. So I'm wondering if Mary would agree with our discussions about thinking about adding the town attorney to that list.
That's another subject about which I have strong opinions, Phil. You might be surprised. The attorney-client relationship is a special one, and being an attorney for now on to 40 years, I feel that selection of the town council gives rise to a relationship where your town manager is the person who's talking to the town council most of the time. And
Mary, not to interrupt, but council SCL.
yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes,
So the
the
people
legal
that-
counsel.
Yep.
So I need to have confidence in the firm or the attorney that I'm going to be asking questions of on a fairly regular basis. In the past, when I first arrived here, one of the outstanding goals that was left not quite completed from my predecessor was to switch town council because the fee, the hourly rate was rather expensive. And again, now I suppose having been an attorney for a long time in this Commonwealth, I am familiar with many law firms and individual practitioners. But I got suggestions from a couple of counselors about who they thought I should hire, and I have to tell you that that would have been not the best choice for us going forward because of a limitation of experience, a limitation of breadth of experience and scope. So we chose, after solicitation of requests, we chose a firm that's sort of a full service firm. In other words, if you have a question, if the guy that's assigned to us can't answer it, they have somebody else in another department who can. I think that that's something that should remain with the town manager, but I may be prejudiced because of my own background. But I don't think it's a council decision by any means, because so much is built in with the budget, controlling legal fees. This raises a whole host of other questions, because I know there've been other issues where commissioners want to be able to call the town lawyer. Certain town councilors want to be able to reach out directly to the legal counsel. I think that would, again, it's your choice to change the charter, and I'm not going to dispute that, but controlling the budget and the consequences financially that arise from that is problematic. So if you're going to change that aspect of the town manager's authority, then I think that the budget responsibility should also be eliminated, and the legal budget should be someone else's responsibility.
Any other thoughts? Yes, Marilyn.
I would like to ask Mary, when in your history with our community and our current legal counsel, do you get frequent requests from other boards for legal opinions? Is this something that is available to the planning board or the Conservation Commission or the library trustees if they have something that's come up? If they go through you, do they generally have an opportunity? Because that seems to be somewhat of a rub with some committees, that access to town council, SEL, is not always available. So
Yes.
how's it being handled, please?
Well, town council, legal counsel is available to all the boards and commissions as town employees and as serving town issues and being responsible for town matters. I mean, certainly they are entitled to a legal opinion, but in fact, I think that was one of the problems with our prior council, who was advising planning without informing the town manager's office. So there was a huge run-up of legal costs. And then the town council, this relates to the Pease Road litigation, where the council wants to proceed on that solar project, in the litigation involving that solar project. I think the dilemma there occurred because the town manager's office wasn't being kept in the loop by council. That part is also history, I hope.
Mm-hmm.
There have been occasions when certain commissions have effectively demanded that I give them counsel when they ask a question that I can answer. I mean, I'm not the town's counsel, and I don't pretend to be, and I don't want to be, but there are sometimes very simple preliminary questions that are put to me that I can provide the answer to. I don't need to have somebody go out, and we don't have to spend $250 for that answer. So it's been a bit of a rub, because certain commissions, I think, tend to, I don't want to say exceed their authority, but I think that they should be much more careful about what they do. We received an open meeting law decision today from the Attorney General's office that's not at all complimentary to one of our commissions in town, and may result in the future in certain penalties and fines and so forth. So I'm trying to manage that and deal with the department head that's responsible for those boards and commissions. So I think when it comes from the department head to me, there's an easier conversation. Sometimes when it comes from the commissioner or board member, there's a little disconnect, because I don't have much of a relationship, unfortunately, with many of those people yet, due to a variety of reasons, but I do have a relationship with all of the department heads. So if the commissioners need something, I think what I've asked them to do is posit that request through their department head, who will then give it to me, and then I'll make a determination. Again, I'm not trying to keep information from anybody, but I am trying to control the budget, and I am trying to, make sure that we're not violating laws as we go about things willy-nilly, sort of.
Thank you, Mary.
Did I see someone else? Yes, Ralph.
So Larry, I'm going to go back to the paragraph, and I was wondering if it would be easier if, instead of us having the 45 days next regular meeting and all within the charter, if we simply said that unless rejected by a majority of the town council members as outlined within the general bylaws. And then create a general bylaw that shows the whole process, time frame, and whatever, because that's easier to adjust and change, rather than putting
Well-
all that into the charter.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we listen to Mary's responses, because we want to get through the whole list. And because the committee can discuss that type of issue on our own. How's that?
Perfect.
Okay. Yes, Jeannie?
I just wanted, I know you said let's move on, but I would wonder if the process would be the same for all these appointments. They may be different.
Say that one more time.
The appointment of a police chief may be different than the appointment of a town clerk. So I'm not sure the process would be the same for everyone. So we may have to have more than one bylaw. That's just off the top of my head of a quick thought.
Okay.
So,
All right.
And I think to Larry's point, we could discuss that going forward at some other
Right.
time.
right.
All right. Miss Mary, the next issue.
Larry, if I
Yes, Phil.
just to stay on this topic for 1 minute.
Mhm.
I'm interested in Mary's thoughts pertaining to the town council. If I looked at it at the last meeting about transparency, some of the council members thought that maybe there wasn't enough interaction in making this choice. Do you think there's something that should be added to this to make that go away so that there is transparency? Is there something that should be in the charter to make the town manager more acceptable as far as being more information going out?
Yeah, Phil, I think Ralph's suggestion about maybe defining the process would solve a lot of these issues going forward. I took issue at the council meeting about the lack of transparency, and since you give me the open door, I'll take issue with it again. I made the issue clear on October 13th. I reported on it on November 10th. I reported on it at length on December 8th. And no counselor said a word about, well, what's your process? What are you doing? How do it better? How come this? How come that? Why not? Until after I made the appointment and made the announcement, that's when one or maybe two counselors decided that it was the time to let me know that they didn't like what I had done. And my opinion on that is that that should have been discussed with me several weeks in advance, and I would have done everything that I could have done to include people. But since the charter was silent and the council was silent, I felt that I was doing what I was supposed to do. And so I think Ralph's suggestion about if you want to change the process and define it clearly, that's okay, because the way it reads, I mean, I think I could have picked up the phone and called somebody from my past that I know from a police, law enforcement, and said, hey, you want to be chief in East Long Meadow? And there wouldn't, I mean, you obviously can vet the appointment after the fact, but there'd be no way to criticize what was done or not done. So the process leaves a lot to be desired.
Yes, Marilyn.
Just to add to Mary's comments, I think possibly part of the issue with this particular candidate search and awarding of an appointment was complicated with COVID, because this process, we were dealing with candidates who were exposed or sick, and so we had Zoom meetings set up, or Mary had Zoom meetings set up for the interviews, and all the interviews were filmed. If we weren't in the middle of COVID, and correct me, Mary, if I'm wrong, you would have conducted all the interviews in your office with perhaps the two individuals who were assisting you. And that would have been, I mean, that's how other interviews have been conducted. Am I wrong in thinking that
No,
that's
I think I said that in the council meeting, that but for COVID, I would have done them in my office.
And just so that the rest of the world knows, there were some counselors who knew exactly what was happening, and there was no question about transparency. We knew what was going on, and I had no problem with it.
Well, let me just add, and I don't really mean to stir the pot, so if this does, I apologize in advance, but I communicate with the council president on a regular basis. And I have to assume, because I trust him, that he is informing the balance of counselors, because I can't call 7 counselors and have 7 conversations. I mean, I could, but then we'd get absolutely nothing done. So, and I trust that Mike is doing that, and I trust that Kathy Hill did it before Mike. So, but I can't be responsible for that because I don't know what their communication is. And I think it's been an ongoing issue among the council itself in terms of their communication protocols. So I don't say that in any fashion whatsoever to be critical of Mike Kane. In fact, 180 degrees opposite that. But I think that's a problem that the council has to figure out how they're going to handle on their own. Because I have to just talk to the president, I think.
Agreed.
All right, our next, Article 3, Section 2, subsection 3, which is giving a power and/or duty to the town manager to prepare and update a long-range plan every 5 years. And I wanted, the committee wanted to know whether this is being conducted.
My notes from you, Larry, say, is this a mini master plan? And in a sense, yes. In a sense, it's a capital improvement plan, which we're working on. My goal, once COVID is over, what I would love to do is have a strategic planning session with all my department heads offsite to go away for a day or two and have everybody have the ability to brainstorm and discuss how they envision the town progressing under the leadership in their particular departments. We've been unable to do that, but it is a goal of mine to get that done. So yes, I think this long-range plan, it's a little non-specific, and I think it does incorporate capital expenditures. I think it incorporates economic development opportunities and perhaps the overall master plan, for which we do have a grant and a series of deliverables that will come due in their finality, I believe, in June of 2021. So I think we're making a lot of progress on that. And it's another one of those works in progress.
Questions, comments, suggestions? Seeing none, our next one is the same article, same section, subsection 10. Talks about keeping a full and complete inventory of all property of the town, both real and personal.
Yes, there is no such document that exists in isolation. I think that the former finance director attempted this in 2016, and then for some reason, obviously something happened and it didn't get done. We do have a series of, we know where all the town assets are and what they are, because every year when we do our insurance renewals, we have to submit all these schedules, but they're not collected in one document. So part of my capital improvement plan that is going to be submitted in the next budget cycle includes not only a fixed asset schedule, but a needs assessment, an introduction, and it'll address some of the things in this long-range plan, because we're trying to work on a 5 to 10 year long-term capital strategic plan, and that'll all be incorporated in that, including the fixed asset list, which now, as I said, is just sort of helter-skelter by department. But we're going to consolidate it and put it all together.
Okay. Any comments, questions? Okay. Our next section is Article 3, Section 2, subsection 16.
The personnel management plan.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, the interim HR director and I have worked together before, and in another time and another planet, we worked together on an employee manual that's 55 pages. of those 55, there's about 7 pages that will become the personnel management for East Long Meadow. It goes from everything from hours of work to employee classifications, full-time, part-time, temporary and seasonal, job posting, how we do it, career opportunities, Fair Labor Standards Act, administrative staff, support staff, exempt employees, employee orientation, security, seniority and service dates, attendance and timelines, personnel records, references, voluntary terminations, reductions in staff. So there's a laundry list of issues that we have described. What I want to do for East Long Meadow is segregate out certain of these pages and make them a separate document, such as this charter calls for here with the personnel management, because those incorporate all of the processes that we do employ now and will continue to do. And then I want a separate document that just has our policies, and then one that shows our benefits and whatnot. But part of the delay here is 5 labor unions on the town side. And with no disrespect intended to them, the slightest change or a suggestion of change necessitates a negotiating session often. And so we just have a lot of difficulties with that. Not with the negotiation of it, but just scheduling it and having the conversation. So, but that's pretty much done. It's just not reduced to writing in the form that I want it to be in.
Yes, Tom.
That seems like it might be a potential landing spot for recruitment procedures instead of changing the charter or making a bylaw and changing a bylaw. If we want to add something to the town about a procedure to take away some of the angst, that seems like that could be a spot for that to go.
I didn't hear the last phrase.
It just seems like that could be something we could add that in there instead of the charter or the bylaw, so that kind of gives whoever happens to be the town manager, head recruiter, some leeway in terms of how they'd like to fill positions.
Any other thoughts? Okay. Our next section is, this is a citizens input we received, and colleagues tell me if I'm wrong. There seems to be some concern, and this was specifically in the library trustees, and I think it may have been on the initial appointment of the library director, whether or not the library trustees were consulted regarding that appointment. I think this was before your tenure. And it's similar, I guess, hearing about appointment of things like a police chief, of involvement. And the concern of the citizen was that the town manager then didn't even meet or speak with the library trustees of what to look for in a library director. And I guess this is a general question. What are your thoughts on your involvement with different commissions or boards vis-a-vis advice and recommendation on appointments? And how much involvement should there be?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. I feel somewhat remiss in that I have not yet met or attended every board and commission, but when you start to look at the litany of how many there are,
I'll try.
probably 30. If you look at the town website, there's a meeting every single night. So having said that as the background, I have met with the library trustees. And I think the relationship currently has evolved to be much better than it was when I got here. There was a lot of, not infighting, but power struggling between the Board of Trustees and the director. And I think both the director and the board and the friends of the library have all sort of, had a bit of a catharsis in terms of their willingness to get along. To answer your question directly, I do think it's important to get the input of boards. We just appointed a new Council on Aging director, and I've not been to a Council on Aging board meeting, but I did send an email before it was suggested at this meeting, by the way, to the chair of that board, asking her to solicit the input from the other members regarding what characteristics, aptitudes, qualities, and so forth they were looking for in a director. And I did get an answer that was helpful. I mean, it wasn't earth-shattering in terms of its content. It had issues that you might think would be appropriate as to what they were seeking in a new director. But I want people who are good enough to volunteer on these boards to feel that their engagement is recognized and helpful. I just sent an email yesterday to a lady who's the treasurer of the Historical Commission. She's been asking me for months about having the town hall declared on the Register of Historic Places. And I've been dealing with that, and I didn't answer her for like 6 weeks, and I feel terrible about it. But, and I've not been to one of their meetings either, but I have been to planning, I've been to conservation, I've been to the library, I've been to conservation, I've been to recreation several times. Unfortunately, I've been to those commissions that have been problems, because if the director of the department reaches out to me and says, I have an issue here, then I make it my business to attend. And some have been more problematic, let me say, than others. Eventually, I suppose, the longer I'm here, I will certainly continue to make the effort to attend all those meetings, if for no reason other than to acknowledge the commitment and the energy that's expended by the people on those boards. Board of Health is another one that I've been to a couple of times. So, and then I'm trying. It's with so many, it's tough to get involved. But I do want their input when it comes time to talk about their leadership, because I want to know what's important to them. And I did that with the police chief's appointment as well. Not that we have a board of police commissioners, but I solicited a lot of information from our local department in that regard.
Yes, Marilyn.
The issue with the library, Diane Tiago, who was very thoughtful in her comments about trying to improve what happens with the library trustees, referenced Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 78, Sections 11-12, which implied, now I haven't looked it up, but it implies that this particular statute gives library trustees a little bit more authority. Even though they're appointed, it still gives them a little bit more authority. So my question to the Charter Commission is, does the charter trump Mass General Laws?
I did look it up, Marilyn.
Okay, please.
And it does. The Home Rule Charter can supersede the general statutes. So to Diane's point, but she's an excellent example of how the situation and the relationship has improved, because as you know, as a counselor, she's now on the Friends board. She's not on the library trustees anymore, but the Friends donated almost $30,000 to recarpet the library. And I just got 2 emails from Diane yesterday asking about how much it's going to cost to finish the job, suggesting to me that maybe there's another donation in the offing. So the short answer is the Home Rule Charter can supersede the provisions of the general law.
I'm happy.
Seeing no other comments, we we also, on Article 3, Section 2, number 13, uh, uh, how and if Human Services gets involved,
On
uh,
the
th-
union contracts?
yeah, with town employee contracts.
Yeah. Well, I've engaged, several of the contracts are now up for renegotiation. We just finished the DPW last summer. And I had I did that negotiation myself. I know the attorney that represents them. We sat down, we hashed out a few things, and that actually was resolved fairly quickly. There's a couple that expired last June. This may be more than you need to know, but one of the unions, the town employees union, had a vote to change their affiliation. So that delayed their initiation of any renegotiation of a contract. So that's underway now. But what happens is I bring in the finance director and I bring in the HR director. And I usually bring in my assistant to take some notes and myself. So we have four, and we just talk with whomever comprises the negotiating committee for the union and their respective representatives. And because I'm trying to get input from obviously the financial side, but also the benefits and the HR, the human resources side. And then ultimately I have to make the call about what the town can afford or what I think the town council will approve for an appropriation for these increases. That the employees, I think by and large, are very happy. I think generally speaking, the negotiation revolves around cost of living raises or salary adjustments and things of that nature.
Comments, suggestions, questions? The last point I have written down is under Article 3, Section 3, Acting Town Manager. And the question is that the town manager, by letter filed with the town council within the first 90 days of his or her appointment, file with the council designating a qualified town employee who would be acting town manager in the town manager's absence. And the question is, I don't know if that was done in our prior town manager. Has that been done?
No, the only time I've advised the council of an acting manager is on the, I've taken 2 one-week vacations. It does raise the specter, though, of a sort of a large organizational change that I would like to think about and consider going forward. I don't need to take your time with it now, but one of the goals that the council has offered to me for consideration is a succession plan for all department heads. And frankly, the biggest problem I have in my position is that there is no backup for me. If I leave, I mean, I took this afternoon off and I had 4 phone calls and about 15 emails, all of which I am happy to say I answered. But there is no backup, and there won't be without a deputy town administrator. My overall goal would be to consolidate finance and HR, because the payroll function that goes out of our finance department really, I think, is a human resource function. I would like to have a step up in our HR department. Our current interim director will be leaving as of the end of the year. That's going to create an enormous hole. So I need to fill that, but I'd like to have a deputy town manager who would be in charge of administration and finance and consolidate those 2 departments. I think we'd save money and I would have a backup. And he would be my acting, or she, or whomever it turns out to be. But the short answer to your question is no, I haven't done that, Larry.
Okay. The acting town manager part of the charter, and former commission members, correct me if I'm wrong, was, God forbid something happened to Mary McNally tomorrow, and you were in a hospital bed, and the town manager was to designate someone who could act in that place. that's different than if you decided to go on vacation for a week. and
Right.
you had the opportunity to appoint someone before you left. This is if a horrendous accident happened and there wasn't time to appoint someone.
No, I get your point. I've relied on Ryan Quimby in
Mhm.
my lengthier absences. As I think mentally through the staff of department heads, honestly, I think I could only come up with perhaps one person that depending on the length of my absence, we don't have a lot of people who are cross-trained with different skill sets. So we've got some people that are very, very good at certain things, but they don't know the first thing about a budget or HR. So that's why I went on my little explanation of what I wanted to do long-term. I think short-term, and maybe I'll do it tomorrow, is I'll make Ryan my acting manager. But poor Ryan, I mean, he's a great guy and he knows everybody in town and he's very talented. I don't know how he would feel about being responsible for HR issues in the budget. I think that would be a tall ask from him at this point. You know what I mean? So
I do, but none of us is infallible.
Mm.
It happens.
yeah,
Okay.
that's certainly true.
Okay.
You're pretty close, Larry.
What's that?
You're pretty close, Larry.
You're pretty close, Larry,
Oh,
yeah.
No. Not even close. Yes, Andy.
So this was my question that I put out there, and I think that each department deserves to have a second in command, second in charge, if you will. So I'm very happy to hear what Mary had to say. I think her comments are right on the money. You know, there's probably no town department more critical than the town manager. So I hope that I wish her success in carrying out what she's delineated here.
Thank you. Jeff, I know we've reached our magic time.
Just gonna say that. You read my mind.
I know. Any other questions or comments from Mary? Or Mary, you have any questions or comments for us?
No, I just really wanted to say thank you, Larry, and the whole committee for inviting me to at least give you what my thoughts are on these topics, because they do impact our ability to manage efficiently and effectively. So I thank you for that.
Welcome. I can speak. We're all proud of you.
Thank you.
You're a plus to the town. Please keep up the good work.
Will do.
Okay. I wanted to alert the committee that based on our request, I have invited Tom O'Connor to our next meeting. And so is it Ginny or Jenny?
Jamie.
Jamie.
Amy, I'm close. I'm getting there.
Yeah, you're close, Larry. Yep.
Yeah, you're getting there, Larry.
Jamie, if you could make note that Tom O'Connor should be brought in on our next meeting.
Okay.
And if there's no further business, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
By Bill,
Second.
second by Jeff. Wait, we have Jeannie first.
Are we just confirming the next meeting is the 29th?
Is that
Is that
okay?
correct? I won't be here. I'll be out of town, but just because I'm
Sure,
going to be.
rub it in. Rub it in. Yes,
I hope to be.
29th, 4:30.
Okay.
Any
Thank you.
discussion? All those in favor? Bill Fonseca,
Yes.
Larry Levine, yes. Andy Fraser,
Yes.
Phil Adams,
Yes.
Jeff Bosworth,
Yes.
Tom Christensen,
Yes.
Ralph Page.
Yes.
It's unanimous. Keep up the good work, people. Stay safe.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Mary.
Mary.
Thank you, Mary.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Thank you, Mary.
Happy Hanukkah.
Thank you.